So, we learn the Chatzar Yosef. This is part 4 of this series. The Gemara says, on page 106, quickly. In the meantime, as Vespasian and Rabbi Yochanan were talking outside of the temple walls, outside of the walls of Yerushalayim, they were negotiating. A messenger arrived from Rome and said to Vespasian, "Rise, for the Caesar has died, and the noblemen of Rome plan to seat you as the leader." So they appointed Vespasian as the king at that moment. At that time, Vespasian was wearing one shoe. When he tried to put on the other one, it would not go on his foot. He tried to remove the other shoe that he was already wearing, but it would not come off. He said, "What is this?" Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "Do not be distressed, because good tidings have come to you, as it is written, good tidings fattens bone." That's a verse in Mishlei. Rather, what is the remedy? What should I do? Have someone with whom you are displeased, have someone you don't like, come and pass before you. As it is written in another verse in Mishlei, a broken spirit will desiccate bone. Desiccate means to shrink, shrivel up. Vespasian did so, and his shoe went on his foot. Vespasian then said to Rabbi Yochanan, "And since you Jews are so wise, why didn't you come to me until now?" It was a 3-year siege. You only came to him after 3 years. He snuck out of Yerushalayim to speak to him after 3 years. Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "Didn't I already tell you?" And he's referring to the conversation they had in the previous section of this chapter, where he told them the Bayanim were keeping him inside, and they didn't let anybody leave. And Vespasian said to him, I too already told you what I have to say to that. And it's referring to the conversation they had in the previous section. Vespasian then said to Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, "I will be going to Rome to accept my new kingly position, and I will send someone else in my place to finish off this war. But ask something of me that I can give you." Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai said to him, "Give me Yavne, the city of Yavne, and its sages. Spare it. Do not kill it. Do not kill the sages there." That's number 1. Number 2, do not kill the dynasty of Rabban Gamliel. That is the dynasty that connects back to Hillel Zaken, that connects back to tribe of Yehuda, that will also connect to the future, God willing, to the Mashiach. And the third thing he asked for was, "Give me doctors to heal Rabbi Tzadok." Rabbi Tzadok was fasting for 40 years because he felt the onset of the destruction of the second temple. And he, on behalf of the whole nation, fasted for 40 years. Not consecutively, obviously, we're talking about daytime fast, most likely. And on Shabbat and Yom Tov, he didn't fast. Rav Yosef and some say Rabbi Akiva said the following about Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai later on in history. What did they say? The verse in Yeshaya 44:25, which we covered extensively in the previous section. What's the verse? "He turns wise men backward and stultifies their knowledge," which is implying that Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, his knowledge was taken back, was held back. Why? Because they're proposing that he should have said something else. He should have said to Vespasian the following thing, to leave the Jews alone altogether. But Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai gauged, he understood, that perhaps Vespasian would not do that much for him. And there would not have been even a small salvation. So that's why he asked for those 3 things. The last part of the Gemara says, the remedy for healing Rabbi Tzadok, what is it? The first day, they gave him water to drink that had some pareh inside. Pareh is coarse flour. The next day, they gave him water with sipuka, which is water with a little bit more refined flour. The next day, they gave him water with fine flour, and until his intestines widened and broadened little by little. That was the story of the Gemara. We went through a bunch of commentators. Now we're in the Chatzar Yosef. Last week, we tried to explain the whole shoe fiasco, the whole shoe situation. How come he couldn't get his shoes on? And we explained based on a simple medicinal approach that perhaps Vespasian suffered from a circulatory problem with his blood, which leads to something called peripheral edema, which is where you get fluid buildup in the ankles, and any sort of certain acute. It can happen acutely if something triggers it that would cause an imbalance in his hormones and in his reaction that we explained, such as receiving the news that he became king. So Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai noticed all this, and he told him the remedy. The remedy that he told him was all based on verses in the Torah, based on the verses in Mishlei and Proverbs that Shlomo Melech wrote, and he showed him the wisdom of the Torah, and that's what impressed Vespasian so much that he helped him out with his issue, but also that not only was he a sage and spiritual, he saw that Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai was not just a sage spiritually in spiritual knowledge, he was also a sage in medicinal knowledge based on the Torah, which really impressed him. And that's why he wanted to help him out and give him those 3 requests. So now we're on page 112. Right, thus far? That's where we left off. Thus far, we have offered the simple interpretation of what likely physically happened to his feet. But, as we should know by now, the words of Chazal, the words of the Chachamim and the Gemara, are always stealthily talking about a deeper subject. Behind the scenes, so to speak, underlying. Right? There's many layers of truth to Torah. We cannot ignore the Metzudat David's explanation of Mishlei 1530. That's one of the verses that Rabban Yochanan Zakai quoted to Vespasian. And also the Malbim's explanation on Mishlei 1722, which is the other verse. Both of those verses we spoke about in the previous lecture. But what do they both say? Both of which seem to support the Maharal's approach to our Gemara. What was the Maharal's approach? Right? The Maharal said that this whole thing with the shoes, him not being able to put one shoe on, take one shoe off, it was all a metaphor. It didn't really actually happen. It was all a metaphor of how he wasn't able to accept the news. That's what putting on the shoes represents. He couldn't put on the news that he became king, and that he couldn't settle his mind. And his spiritual, capacity widened and broadened because of the excitement and confusion. So that's what the Maharal said, and there was some support to that in the verses, right? As we saw, these commentaries in the Metzudat David and the Malbim. Therefore, taking the Maharal's view into consideration now, right? We have to consider what he said. We're not completely writing it off. It is quite likely that there was indeed some internal struggle occurring within Vespasian. But what does that have to do with shoes, specifically? Whereas in the Gemara's world, where it's all a metaphor, why did the Gemara choose to present this metaphor through the whole thing of the shoes? We will not go so far as to say that nothing physically happened with the shoes and it was all a metaphor like the Maharaj chose to explain. Rather, we purport to say that the physical phenomena surely happened as well, as we explained above, and then also in the previous lecture we explained what we think happened on a medicinal level to his feet. But as is often the case, the physical story mirrors what is actually happening on a deeper mode. Physical and spiritual are not opposites. They are opposites to an extent, but they are not irrelevant to each other. They're very relevant to each other. They affect each other. They move in parallel worlds together. They bounce off each other. Right? So, with that in mind, with this context, we can explain that the shoes here represent Vespasian's impending responsibilities as king. As our Gemara states, at the time the news of his nomination was delivered to him, one shoe was already on. At the time, the other foot was naked. So he had one shoe on and the other foot was naked. Bereft of burden, so to speak. Free. So stands Vespasian, one foot fastened by footwear and the other bare. Very poetic. Representing his internal struggle concerning whether he should report back to Rome for his impending coronation to become king and take on the onus, the duties, the job of the king, right? The kingly duties. It's a lot. What?
This is some English teacher stuff.
This is beautiful stuff, isn't it? But you understand it. It's pretty simple. He's having an internal struggle of should he take upon this huge job now or not. His intuition...
This is you? Or this is what you're saying the Maharal is saying? Like,
this is me.
Yeah.
His intuition was being pulled from both directions and he simply could not decide. Right? One shoe on, one shoe off. That's what they represent. The language of our Gemara then bodes well. What does the Gemara say? When he tried to put on the other one, it would not go on his foot. Meaning he thought to totally accept his duties as his kingly duties, you should say. I think you should say that, right? Kingly duties.
Yeah.
But the thought would not fit, so to speak. It couldn't fit on him, meaning he wasn't ready. He tried to remove the other shoe that he was already wearing, but it would not come off, meaning he intended to completely give up the opportunity to become king. He said, maybe I should just let it go, take it off me, get it out of my sight and get it off my to-do list, not let it be a burden. But the other shoe would not budge, signifying that he could not completely reject and ignore the benefits of being king, like meaning he's stuck in the middle.
How is a king nominated or determined?
They had many different ways. I mean, I don't know if the
Right,
Romans,
and
they had a
the-
senate. The Romans had a senate
Yeah.
who would vote on it,
And
if I'm
why?
not mistaken.
Like the other king died? Is that what happened?
Oh yeah, that's right, yeah.
So the other king died, so
Yeah.
now they voted on a new king. It's not like
Right.
the other
So
king.
the question is, how come the other king didn't have a success?
Yeah, maybe the other king chose him as the successor. Is
Maybe.
that
I don't know
possible?
exactly
Before
how.
his death?
The Gemara doesn't tell us how it happened, but bottom line, they
So
chose
he
him.
has a choice to reject kingship.
Yeah, why not? Of course.
I don't know. So are you allowed to reject?
Yeah, let's see why not. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go forward. The narrative continues with Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai observing this. He sees this whole thing happening. Who, through his great wisdom, was able to discern Vespasian's internal struggle based on the physically detectable signs. Right? He's seeing what's happening and he's connecting the dots. He quoted Mishle 15:30. What did it say over there? Good tiding, good news, fattens bone. With which he was referring to the obvious swelling of Vespasian's feet, his legs. It is noteworthy, though, that the first part of that verse that he quoted reads the following way. It says in English, enlightening of the eyes will gladden the heart. About which the Mitzvah David explained that the clarification of doubt causes great joy. That's how the commentary explained that verse. Clarification of doubt causes great joy. So Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai's wisdom sensed that this was exactly what Vespasian needed in that moment. A clarification of doubt. That's what he was begging for. That's what he needed because he was stuck. Should I take it? Should I not? One shoe on, one shoe off. Vespasian was lost in an emotional whirlwind of doubt. His nationalist onus, meaning his duty, pulling from two different directions. So Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai offers a solution for his conundrum, as we say, or his problem. He offers a solution for his problem. What does he say? He suggests having someone with whom he is displeased walk before him. He tells them, take someone you don't like, have him walk before him. This requires thought for a second. Who could there be on the outskirts of Jerusalem during the siege of Jerusalem, 3 years into it, at that moment in time, with whom Vespasian was genuinely displeased?
Well, does it need to be genuinely displeased with him?
Who did he not like
He
over
could have been displeased with the efforts of one of his soldiers, or he could have been
Okay, let's see. It is not likely that it was one of the lower ranking Roman soldiers, since the general did not really interact with them on a personal level all the time. He had intermediary, rankings of higher generals that would deal with the lower generals. So it must have been someone amongst the upper ranked officers, with whom Vespasian regularly conversed, right? Who often, maybe he often opposed his views and policies and says, no, I want to do it this way, right? I mean, that could be a likely possibility. That could be the person he didn't like. By seeing him, Vespasian was reminded of the politics that are so prevalent amongst higher ranked officials, right? These are the guys who run the politics and the opinions and everything. People on that level, the higher ranking officials, such as himself and this enemy of his. Thus, Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai was hinting to him that if he were to leave and take on his kingly duties in Rome, he will have the power to overrule those subjects, to overrule those higher ranking officials that disagree with him, such as this enemy of his. And he'll be able to push his own political agenda as practically the most powerful man on the planet Earth at that time, because the Roman Empire was huge. In this way, he was convinced, and he was able to slip the other shoe on. That's what pushed him over. That's what said, okay, if I'm able to beat guys like that, I'll take it. And that's why he got the other shoe on, because he made a decision. The doubt was clarified.
Hey, Yosef, you're good at this, bro. You're good at this.
Why are we suggesting that he had this internal struggle?
I'm suggesting that is the representation of the shoes.
Okay. And why couldn't we suggest that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the person he was displeased with?
Because the Gemara...
He wouldn't have rewarded him.
Because first of all, he helped him. Second of all, the Gemara says that he offered him the advice to have someone passed by him, and he said he did, and he did so. So it means he
maybe-
wasn't the one. The simple Gemara means that someone else came along.
Okay.
Yeah, because says he did so.
Because he was a little bit displeased with the rabbi.
Yes,
said,
he has questions with him, but it seems like he won him over, as we saw. He won him over at the end of the day.
I mean, after this episode fully, he won him over.
Yeah, it was a gradual thing. Yeah.
Okay.
So now, as a token of his gratitude for aiding him with his internal mental struggle he was having, represented by the physical shoes struggle, along with his appreciation for Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's keen wisdom and advice that he gave him, Vespasian granted the personal requests of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So it makes sense now why he would help him. That was one of our questions. Why would he want to help him? Why would he want to grant him these three things? But after how we explained it, I think it makes good sense. A little further. I think we should be able to finish today, hopefully. The Maharal revealed that the three things that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai requested corresponded to the three midot, three attributes that we speak a lot about in this book of Chesed, Din, and Rachamim. Rachamim, well, we spoke about it before. Chesed means ultimate giving. Din means ultimate taking back, holding back, restricting, putting limits, and judgment. Rachamim means mercy. It's the perfect balance between the two. Those are three of the major midot, major attributes, ways in which God runs the world. Right? If you can find those things in literally everything, if you look deep enough. Those three aspects of something. Chesed, Din, and Rachamim. So the Maharal said those three things that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai asked for. What were they again? Quick review. Yavne, the city of Yavne, not to destroy them. Rabban Gamliel's dynasty, and the healing of Rabbi Tzadok. So this is a fascinating idea that needs to be expanded. And slightly modified as well. It does not make sense for Vespasian to grant anything to Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai that he felt he did not owe him as a measurable token of gratitude. Meaning, if he felt he didn't deserve it, he wouldn't have given it to him. By the fact that he gave him these three things, it means he felt he deserved it. Based on how we have explained the encounter, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai aided Vespasian on three fronts. In three different ways he helped him. Right? First and foremost, he delivered a sort of prophetic message to Vespasian, informing him that he would be king. Remember, that was back in the section 2. He told him, you're a king. And he was like, taken aback. You can't call me king. That's treason. But he was right, because someone came and told him he's king.
Shouldn't he apologize then to the rabbi?
Okay, he's a Roman general in the middle of a war. He granted him three things. It's good enough. So, prophetic message informing that he would be king before it actually happened. He proved so with the verses in the Torah that indicated that Yerushalayim could not be taken by anyone but a king. Right? That was in the previous section. He brought the sources that says Yerushalayim shall be taken by a king. Therefore, if you're coming to defeat us, you must be a king. Why is the 8 over here?
Footnote didn't go on the king.
That's a mistake we made there. Okay. Editing mistake. Once it became a reality that the delivery of the good tiding, the good message from the messenger, a certain appreciation for Torah was aroused in Vespasian. Why? Because he saw this guy, this rabbi, just told me based on some verses in his Torah that I must be a king. I couldn't believe it. A few minutes later, the guy comes, tells me I'm a king. The Torah must be worth something.
It was really a few minutes later?
Whatever. It was the same conversation. A few moments later. I don't know, an hour later, it was a conversation. Corresponding to that new, tiny appreciation that Vespasian has in his heart now for Torah, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai asked for the sparing of Yavne and its sages. What's Yavne so special about that city? It's the place where the Torah was being learned at high levels. All the Chachamim were there. That's the Torah that we know till today from there. That was preserved. Thanks to Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai getting this grant from Vespasian, the Torah they learned eventually got encoded into the Mishnah and Gemara, and eventually gave rise to all the halakha and everything we do today in Orthodox Judaism. Right? So the place where Torah is being learned. So Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai knew he could request this. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai knew that he could request this with a high probability of Vespasian granting it due to the Torah wisdom that he had revealed to him, and the fact that he, like we explained before, that he...
Also, how does How does he know that that's where the Torah wisdom is?
How does he know?
Vespasian.
The Chachamim started moving out there years before the destruction of the Second Temple, slowly. So it was an old thing. It was a neighborhood of
Vespasian
of
would
Chachamim.
know that that's where the...
I guess if he does his recon before going to the war, he knows what's what in the enemies. But either way, it says that it's sages. The words the Gemara uses that Rabbi Yochanan's guy requested was, give me Yavne and its sages, meaning spare them. So he understood as the sages of Torah. So in this instance, Torah corresponds to one of the midot. Which midah? They attribute the midah of chesed, the giving midah, as the Maharal explained. Right? Why? Because Maharal brought a verse connecting Torah to chesed. There's a verse that says, Torah chesed al lishono. The Torah of chesed is on his tongue. There's a verse in the Tanakh like that. So Torah is connected to chesed there, and that's where he helped him, so that's where he granted his wish. The next way in which Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai helped Vespasian was in spreading Vespasian's reverence and respect, making him feared, by staying silent in their clash of words, right? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Vespasian had a back and forth from section 2 and section 3, talking about the barrel and the snake and why didn't you come for 3 years and the whole, etc. And at the end of those conversations, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai stayed quiet, stayed silent, didn't answer. Why? In respect, in order to show that he, quote unquote, wins the other one, that Vespasian wins the argument. Allowing Vespasian to look like the winner, even though he could have easily retorted to his question, right? He could have easily destroyed him in the debate, he chose not to, right? Look at note 9 as we explained before. Moreover, he influenced Vespasian to make the decision of accepting his kingly nomination amongst Vespasian's internal struggle, as we explained above. Both of these correspond to the midah of din. Why din? Because din is associated with reverence, with fear, and then also the mighty power of a king. Right? He convinced him to become a king. King is din, and he also maintained his reverence and fear by not answering back to him. That's din. In return, corresponding to this attribute of din, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai asked for the sparing of the dynasty of Rabban Gamliel, which was the lineage of the presidency, the Nasiut, a type of kingship as well, type of leader kingship, for the Jews of Israel at the time. That's also din, because it was the king of the Jews, so to speak. So that corresponded to that. Lastly, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai assisted Vespasian medically, giving him the proper advice to reduce the swelling in his legs, as we explained above. Medicine corresponds to the midah of, the third one, rachamim. Medicine responds to that. Healing and medicine is rachamim. Because rachamim, or tiferet it's also called, is the attribute of the perfect balance and harmony. It's the balance between chesed and din, but it's also the theme of balance in everything. How is that connected to medicine? Physiological imbalance, meaning when your body is imbalanced, in one form or another, manifests as sickness, being ill. And the role of healing such a person is to rebalance that imbalance, right? Anytime someone's sick, there's an imbalance in some levels, in some hormones, in an infection of a certain pathogen, something's off with the blood, cancer cells, whatever. Any sickness is an imbalance of a healthy human being, of all the numbers that a healthy human being should have. Right? So fixing and healing it is correcting that imbalance and bringing it back to balance. Why do I say balance? If you ever get a blood test, right? Nowadays your doctor can send you your results of the blood test. And they show you, if this part of your blood, the sugar in your blood, for example, is within this range, or the hemoglobin is within this range, they give you a range of numbers from here to here. That's considered balanced and that's considered healthy. If it's 2-4 this way or 2-4 that way, it's an imbalance and there's a problem. And they break down all the parts of your blood. Simple way to understand. It is for this reason that the vowelization, the nekudot, the vowels that we put in the name of essence, in God's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, that corresponds to Tiferet, right? So before I say that, Hashem's name of essence, Yud and then the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, is very deep, has main secrets inside. One of them is that if you put a certain vowel, nekudah, the same one on all 4 of the letters, it corresponds to a different midah. Each midah has one of these, right? Chesed, din, tiferet, all of them. Chokhmah, binah, dat, all 10 have.
How many Yokudot do we have? How many?
Vowels? A lot.
We have 10?
Yeah.
Because you said in Shmonai.
Yeah, it's in there. It's in the Sephardi Shmonai Esrei. If you look over there, every time you say God's name, Baruch Atah Hashem, it has a special nakud, a special one of those vowels on all 4 letters. Why? Because it's corresponding to one of the midot. That request that they're making is corresponding to that one of those midot, one of the sefirot of God, right? So one of them is tiferet. What's the vowel that goes on the name of Yudke Vavke in tiferet?
There's a different vowel on each request?
Yes. I don't know if your app's gonna have it.
Okay.
But let's see doing that. So for tiferet, what is it? It's the name associated with the blessing in the Shmoneh Esrei, asking for healing. It's in Rofei Cholei Amo Yisrael. Baruch Atah Hashem, Rofei Cholei Amo Yisrael. Blessed are you, Hashem, the healer of the sick of His nation Israel.
I thought it was in Silachan.
Yeah, I never noticed. Wow.
Oh, I thought
Which
it
one
was
is
in
a different
Silachan.
midah?
Everything.
What's the Silachan is Chesed. That's Chesed. Tiferet is Rofei Cholei Amo Yisrael. Take my word for it.
I just want to double check.
Okay?
So with the triangle dots,
Say go, that's Chesed.
yeah, this is where we ask for forgiveness.
Yes, because God is. Why forgiveness? Who says you do? Why should I forgive you?
Okay.
Why? Because it's like, imagine somebody killed somebody.
Yeah.
They're terrible. I don't
No,
know. Hold on. And they go to a court of law, and the judge, please forgive me.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean?
Give mercy for that.
The only way to forgive you is go beyond the letter of the law. Which midah is beyond the letter of the law?
Yes.
Chesed.
Okay, and then for redeeming the Al Yisrael,
That's din.
it's 2 dots. The 2
Din.
dots is din. So anytime it's Ezra,
Gemara.
that's how it's gonna be. Okay,
Your
we're
question?
sick of the people that's
Rofei Cholei Amo Yisrael.
that's
That's
a dot on top.
that's tiferet.
And
1 dot on top. That's
The
tiferet.
phone flew all the way here. Who's
yeah, it did.
Rofei Cholei Amo Yisrael. Yeah.
Atah Chonen has one that's a straight line.
That's patach. That's chokhmah.
Chokhmah, and then Hashivinu
That's
has
bina. No, I'm talking about.
Sela. 3 dots is what? You said Tiferet. the
No,
three?
no. 3 dots is chesed. I never said 3 dots is chesed. 1 dot is tiferet. 1 dot on top left of the word, the letter.
I didn't.
It's called cholam.
I thought you were saying something else when I was editing this. I didn't
What?
understand that this is what.
It only has.
That's why I didn't look
I
it up.
didn't explain
before.
it too well here. I should have put a footnote explaining more.
So, Bonei Yerushalayim, it's the 3 dots in a
That's
row.
hod.
What's Hod translated?
Crazy. I thought it was in the
Or-
first 3. I thought it was like in the first couple. I didn't know it was in all 3.
So interesting.
Yeah, each one deserves its own right time and explanation of what it is. But here I'm just trying to show you the fact that anything that has to do with healing and medicine is the perfect balance of the middle. That's tiferet. That's why when you say the bracha, God, you are the healer, that you are activating, you should be thinking about the midah of tiferet. Yeah. So that's what the Rabbi Yochanan Zakai did. He activated tiferet to heal, to give the advice to heal Vespasian's foot issue, and therefore, paramount to this, Rabbi Yochanan Zakai requested that Vespasian provide doctors for the healing, for the severe medical condition of Rabbi Tzadok who was fasting, right? Healing for healing. Do you see that? It all fits perfectly. 3 midot were activated. He helped him with 3 midot. He got granted back things for those 3 midot. Everything was exactly deserved. Thus, Rabbi Yochanan Zakai only asked for things he knew Vespasian owed him. The city of Yerushalayim in its proper state, with God's divine presence, called the Shekhinah, there, properly concentrated there, this corresponds to the attribute of Malchut, which is the lowest of the 10 Sefirot, okay? Malchut is the most associated with God's Shekhinah, which means, Shekhinah literally comes from the word Shochin, to dwell. To dwell. The neighbor also comes from that word, neighbor, meaning to dwell with you. When God is your neighbor, when you could feel him physically here, that's called the Shekhinah present. And that's what it was in the high days and glory days of the temple, when he was there in Yerushalayim, right?
Can you send us a link with what each vowel?
A link? I don't know if there's a link on it.
You can find something, a picture or something.
Search it. It's in my book. I can tell you the picture in my book, but it's in Hebrew. I mean, it's in a different book. So now, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai knew that sparing the entire city would be asking too much. So he salvaged whatever he could. Look at the depth here for a second, okay? Look at the depth here. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai helped him on 3 attributes: Chesed, Din, and Rachamim. Keeping the temple and keeping God's presence there would be corresponding to the midah of Malchut. Malchut is the 10th one, which encompasses all the above ones, including Chesed, Din, and Rachamim in there, following it. If you want to see a picture, again, go to page 527 in the book, we have a picture of it. So look at this now. The genius is that he salvaged the first 3 midot of the lower 7 sefirot. I mean, the 3 things that he got, those 3 things he salvaged of the lower 7, right? The 10 are broken up to the top 3 and lower 7. Lower 7 is the physical world. Those lower 7, Chesed, Din, and Rachamim, as we explained, he salvaged those, which are the major attributes of the lower 7 that will sprout the eventual manifestation of Malchut in the form of the Shekhinah resting in Yerushalayim in the final redemption anyway. How so? The Sefirot unfold. The way they work, the lights of God, the lights of the world of Atzilut, the highest world, what we call the Sefirot, these attributes, these midot, they unfold in a stepwise fashion, step by step, from 1 to 10. They have many formations. One of the most basic ones is they unfold. The first one, Keter, has all 10 inside. When you unfold it up, now you see the other 9 inside. You unfold it again, you see the other 8. And it keeps going. They unfold. They devolve, so to speak. From top to bottom. And so salvaging Chesed, Din, and Rachamim, which is what he did, what it did is that it locked in the eventual prominence of Malchut, which is the last one. The eventual unfolding will happen. Because it happens in a stepwise fashion. Those lights bounce off step by step, which is defined by Shekhinah dwelling utopianly in the revealed world in the future to come. Which means the depth was that even though Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai saved only those 3 things, which is Chesed, Din, and Rachamim, by definition he also saved whatever's below them, because they keep opening up to eventually those lights open up to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. And so what we ultimately wanted was Malchut. Malchut is the last one where God's presence is there. He couldn't ask for it now because Veshveshim wouldn't have given it to him. But by getting those 3, he set the seeds that eventually we will get to Malchut. Because since we have those top 3, by definition they keep unfolding and devolving to the last one, which is Malchut, which is God's presence in Yerushalayim.
So if he asked for Yesod, isn't that the same thing? It would also eventually lead to
Yes.
Malchut? So is it
But
better to ask...
Yesod is more deeply connected with Malchut.
Is it better to ask for something closer to Malchut or further from Malchut? When you look
It's
at the
better
diagram.
to ask
Based on
for...
what he said further, because they fold out.
Right, because
So
you
if
get
you
more.
have the top
get
one,
more.
you have all 10 of
So
them.
if he asked for
Right.
Keter,
But he couldn't. That's the hidden world. The top 3 are the hidden world. So he asked for physical things in the physical world, which he could. And where does the physical world start? Chesed. Chesed, Din, Tiferet, etc. Okay? Let's finish this off here. Therefore, the verse Yeshaya 44:25, again, Yeshaya, Isaiah, the same verse they keep saying about the Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, that was read upon Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai by Rabbi Yosef and on Gemara. Again, we're saying, in our understanding, that it was not a criticism of his ineptitude. If you read the Gemara simply, it sounds like they're dissing him, they're insulting him, chas v'shalom. But we keep trying to show and defend that it's not true. It's not a criticism of him, rather, it's a praise of his genius. Right? This is connected to the second section as well, where we explained more how when they said that this verse about him, it was showing how smart he was.
The way you learned it out, yeah.
Yes, the
then
way I
it
learned
would,
it, yes.
then it would have said he could have said. The could would have been the right word.
So I'll keep going. So the phrase in when Gemara says "Iba'ele lememar," that simply could be translated as "he should have said to him," must therefore, according to our understanding, be rendered "he could have said to
When
him."
you say rendered, means it could be translated to
Yes,
could.
yes, it could be understood as "could." Yes. Iba'e. The word "iba'e" could mean "could" or "should,"
So why do we generally translate it as should?
because usually it's "should."
Usually it should, but it could be could.
Yeah.
So could makes more sense in this one.
According to because we're trying to show it's defending his genius.
Because when you say should have said, that means
If I tell you should have said this, it means you're
That
dumb. You
means-
should have
That's what
said
it says
this.
when you learn
Yeah.
Gemara.
But if I tell you
you could have
he's
said,
so smart,
yeah,
he could have said this,
Right.
but he didn't.
right, it shows
It's
bit-
a
different
defense.
side. Right.
That's the point. Yeah, so could and should changes everything.
So why not originally translate it as should, as could from the Gemara? Why didn't?
Because the simple understanding of the Gemara, most people who just read it will probably translate it as should, and we did it that way in order to build up and show you the punchline here that it's really could.
So Art Scroll, when they translate it, what do they
I
translate?
don't know. I don't look at the article.
Okay.
Again, that's just one of them. It's one opinion,
Of course,
one
right, I
translation,
just want to know
right?
because that's a big difference. Could and should.
Right. If you look at it simply on a simple level, you could say should, but that would mean they're sort of criticizing him.
Mm-hmm.
But we want to say that it means could, which means they're actually doing the opposite
Mm-hmm.
and defending his genius.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see here. Which means again, it means he could have said to him to have the entire city spared, but he did not do so because he knew that Vespasian would not give him so much, since he would only be willing to grant exactly according to how Rabban Zakai helped him, as we explained above. He helped him with those three things, so he asked for those three things.
Also, if you use the word should, that means if he said that, he would have got it. If he said spare the whole city, spare all of Jerusalem, then
Right, so that's
he would
what
have
the
got it.
Gemara implies. Then the next line in the Gemara says that he couldn't say that because he thought that he wouldn't give it to him.
Right.
So it defended him.
So
Anyway.
should doesn't fit as well as could. Could looks like it fits better.
Yeah. So it's not that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai salvaged whatever he could grab.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, he salvaged exactly and precisely what he could
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to eventually attain the goal of the whole city of Yerushalayim reaching its optimal point at the culmination of the world events in the in times of Mashiach, the coronation of Mashiach and the final redemption, which is going to be the Malchut, which will eventually come since you salvage the top three. Because the way they function is that they open up and unfold till the end stage eventually.
So it's like he could, like let's say God forbid there's a fire and you could take anything next to you and run away.
Right.
But it's better to take exactly what you need and run away.
Yeah.
Like if you have that opportunity to salvage what you
Right. You take exactly what you need
Yeah.
in order to salvage everything else. So I guess in that example,
Mm-hmm.
of a guy's house is on fire with a lot of valuables in there.
He could take whatever's next to
He
him.
could take whatever's next to him, or he could just take the insurance card,
Just the valuable stuff.
take it to the insurance and say, look, I have insurance, and get the full value of everything.
Doesn't need to take the insurance.
But that's the point I'm trying to show here, because that's what Malchut is. Malchut is everything. You should have
He insured the
He got the insurance.
longevity of
He got the insurance that will get the Malchut eventually.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm trying to say. That's the depth. It's hard to explain, but that's how it works. Good. Last paragraph. This is exactly the hidden gem within the words at the end of our Gemara, describing the method used to heal Rabbi Tzadok. Right? We didn't explain that. Why is the Gemara telling us how to heal 40 years of fasting? So the Gemara says, until his intestines widened little by little, and that says it all. The protocol was a step-by-step, quote-unquote, little by little, snowballing effect of the widening of his intestines. That's how they healed him. The Sefirot that we're talking about now, the attributes of God, they are organized in the supernal structure corresponding to the anatomy of the human body. The area of the intestines, which is the torso here, the body, that would correspond to the Sefirah of Tiferet. Another mistake, should say Sefirah, singular. Of Tiferet. Tiferet and downwards. Since Tiferet is the torso area, the body. Tiferet is all the visceral, the vital organs. Or like the intestines. So our Gemara is hinting that by attaining the three things that Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai did, those three things he got, that correspond to the three levels, right? The three Sefirot, corresponding to the first three of the lower seven Sefirot, of Chesed, Din, and Rachamim, the stage was set for the tumbling through the waves of time, for the eventual achievement, like we've been saying, of Malchut at its finest. He got the insurance card.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how he saved all of us till this very day. That's going to end it on Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai. That's the end of chapter 9. Next week we're going to start with chapter 10. A very fascinating chapter about the continuation of the destruction of the Second Temple. When a new person takes over Vespasian's position as the general in the war. That is, of course, the infamous Titus HaRasha and the chronicles of what happens to him. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.